Hello and welcome to the February 2022 Recreational Astronomy Night Meeting online edition of the RASC Toronto Centre. My name is Paul Markov, coming to you from snowy Markham, Ontario. As you've heard me say many times before, I'm always on the lookout for speakers. If you have a presentation in mind, please get in touch with me. We have openings for the April and later meetings. I'm glad to report that the March meeting is already full. Tom will tell us who the speakers are at the end of this meeting. And a reminder that our meetings are held on the first Wednesday of each month. Before we start with the presentations, I'd like to thank our top-notch technical team, comprised of Andrew and Betty Reed, Emma Seabrook, and Ward LeGros. Thank you for making these online presentations possible for us. We have 3 presentations this evening, and we should be done no later than 9:30. The speakers for tonight are Andy Beaton with The Sky This Month, followed by Michael Cook, and he'll talk to us about relocating and expanding Newcastle Observatory. And finally, Krishna Vedela will tell us about an Astronomy Logbook, a 21st century stargazer's pocketbook. Our president, Tom Luton, will close the meeting with announcements as usual. And if you have any questions for our speakers, you can enter them in the YouTube chat box, and Emma will ask your questions to the speaker. And if you are attending the presentations for the first time or not, and if you aren't a Toronto Centre member, please say hello through the chat box as well. And that's it for me. I'll turn it over with Andy and The Sky This Month.
Hi, my name's Andy Beaton. I'm talking to you from my subterranean basement office in downtown Toronto. And I'm here to talk about the sky this month, what we've got to look forward to in the sky between now and the next meeting. So I have a usual list of stuff I like to go through: the big picture, important stuff coming on, key dates, the moon, planets, the deep sky, double star in case Blake is watching. I don't want him to get mad at me. A variable star, and whatever is coming up in the world of spaceflight. So here we are. This is tonight in a couple hours. If you have the ability to look through the clouds and the rain and see the sky, this is what we'd be seeing. It's our typical midwinter sky: Orion, Taurus, all your favorite winter constellations. We have a few planets there. We've got Neptune just setting. Moon is also close to the horizon. No big planets, as you may have noticed on any clear nights we've had recently. If we wait for a month and then get up at the crack of dawn and see what's up, say 5 o'clock in the morning on March 3rd, just before the next meeting, we get to see our summer constellation starting to appear. We've got Cygnus rising there. We've got Scorpius and a bit of Sagittarius appearing over the southeast horizon. So, we've got a sign that spring and summer are going to return, and we're not going to be stuck under snow like this for the rest of the year. Okay, this is what happens when you take a look at the clock and see when astronomical twilight is stopping and starting. The nights are getting shorter. We're past the winter solstice. Tonight, astronomical twilight ends at 10 to 7 and starts again around 5:40 in the morning. In a month, won't be dark until 7:30, and it'll only stay dark until 5 o'clock. Good news for people who like a bit of daylight in their life. Bad news for astrophotographers who need as much dark night as possible. So, key dates: new moon on the 11th, Moon at apogee on the 18th and perigee on March 2nd. I've thrown in a little note there of which one is which because, I've been doing this for decades and I never remember. Full moon on the 27th, if you want to schedule non-astronomy activities for that night. And, that's it, because really this is a seriously dull month. There's nothing exciting listed in any of the major sources I've been able to find about stuff that's happening this month and no other time. It's probably a good time for lots of cloud and snow and get it out of our system. So the moon, first quarter on the 19th, full moon on the 27th. New moon on the 11th is the one that everybody really cares about because that means we're getting our best night for dark sky viewing. The lunar X, if people are interested in that, it's a cool shadow feature on the moon. When the sun is at a certain angle, it lights up a couple of crater rims to make it look like there's an X floating above the lunar surface. It's pretty cool. This is not an optimal time for it. It kind of happens just before noon on February the 8th. But, with decent telescopes, you should be able to see it even during daylight. That's a good thing about the moon. You can always see it. Planets coming up. As I say, this is an exceedingly dull month in many ways. We'll get some limited views of Mercury in the morning once we get towards the end of the month. Same with Venus, visible before sunrise in the early part of the month. Otherwise, it's going to be too close to the sun. Mars is visible just before dawn. That means it's going to be low to the horizon when the sun sets, which means we're going to get lousy views of Mars as well. So your rocky planets, this may not be the month for that. And the big planets, the showpieces. Well, Jupiter, it's going to be hidden by the sun until later in the month, and we'll just get a glimpse of it early in the morning. By mid-month, the Saturn will also be appearing in the dawn. It's not going to be an outstanding view of either planets, but if you're up that early and you've got a portable telescope, yeah, at least drag it out, have a look. I mean, it's always nice to see the rings of Saturn and the moons of Jupiter, even if you're not going to see amazing detail or anything like that. Uranus and Neptune, those are your best options for seeing planets in the evening. Neptune is pretty close to the sun. It's going to set not long after sunset. It's not an optimal object this month. On the other hand, Uranus is in Aries. It's good and high when the sun sets, and you'll get a few hours of good viewing of that before it disappears. If you have a large telescope, you could probably track a few of its moons as well. The dwarf planets, Pluto and Ceres are the ones that you can actually see from Earth with amateur equipment. Pluto's in Sagittarius and close to the sun, so it's kind of a write-off for this month as well. Ceres, however, is going to be a good one. It's right up there between the Pleiades and the Hyades. It's a 9th magnitude, so it should be easy to find. And the really cool thing about Ceres is it moves quickly, at least as far as celestial objects go. So if you want an interesting project on all the clear nights we're getting, make a careful note of its position from night to night and watch it as it moves along through the sky. Now, when I say the sky is dull, just because there is no planets and stuff, and we've still got a universe of things to look at. So dull is relative. I picked M1, the Crab Nebula, as my deep sky object for this month. It's a bit of a challenging object. The supernova remnant from, I think, 1054. It's interesting in a lot of ways. For one thing, you'll need it for your Messier list. For another thing, it's a very weird and interesting astronomical object. It's a supernova remnant being lit up by a pulsar within it. This pulsar is just blasting away synchrotron radiation as it rotates at insanely high speeds with powerful magnetic fields. It's a very interesting object from the point of view of physics. What that means is it's not only an emission nebula, it's a reflection nebula, and it's reflecting weird wavelengths of light. The nebula filter is not going to be as helpful as you had hoped. The emission nebula, the hydrogen that's being lit up by the radiation, it'll help with that, but all the reflection light, it's not going to do a thing for you. The downside is it's pretty dim and it's a very low contrast object. I myself have never seen it from the city. I've tried many times, but it's just not there. You really need a dark sky and a bit of aperture to be able to track it down. And I've thrown in a picture of it there. This is one taken by the European Southern Observatory. It doesn't look like a crab to me, but I'm not an 18th century astronomer, and my imagination's not that great. There's a thing in evolutionary sciences where apparently crabs have evolved, or crab-like creatures have evolved 8 different times in the history of life on Earth, and I guess that's behind that. People just naturally tend to see crabs. There are cool things you can do if you're really into the dedicated business of astronomy. Dig out your camera, try and image the Crab pulsar, the 16.5 magnitude star at the center. If you're really into it, you could even hook up some kind of rotating thing so you could get images with and without the pulsating pulsar. This is all professional astronomy stuff from 50 years ago, but the amateur business has really stepped up over the past decade. So I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't somebody on this call who had the technical know-how to be able to do that. Something else you can do is image the nebula. Get a good, sharp, detailed image. Wait for 10 or 20 years, come back, take another one, and look for motion in the tendrils, see as it's expanding. If you don't feel like waiting for 20 years, look up one of the many images that have been taken over the past century. I'm absolutely sure you can find something with enough detail in it that you should be able to compare it to the best images you're going to get. And the other thing you could try, and this is something that I've always been curious about but never done, is try some radio astronomy. You read about people who've, in the pioneering days of radio astronomy, set up networks of wires and poles in their own backyard, and were detecting things like Jupiter and Scorpius X1 and the Crab Nebula. It's a thing that could be detectable by one of us with amateur equipment. So if you're really ambitious and you're sick and tired of all the clouds that are over us all the time, there's an option for an astronomical project that would really impress your friends. I'm also going to throw Levy 401, item 401 on the Deep Sky Gems list in your Observer's Handbook. A small telescope, it's a Y-shaped asterism. Winston Churchill's V signal. I'm not going to do it in front of the camera here because it's rude in many parts of the world. But I will suggest it for a couple of reasons. One, it's the first step towards your Deep Sky Gem certificate. It's something to look at in the sky when you're just waiting for your telescope to cool down and before you can start your serious observing. And I also want to point it out because Frank Dempsey suggested it to me. And one of the things that I like about the RSC is that I am not a lone astronomer. I've got a community around me. And yeah, for this talk, if you've got stuff that you think I should know about that's coming up in the month, please let me know. Send me an email, and I would be happy to have a look at it and throw it into the talk if it seems like something that people would be interested in. So comets and meteors, well, meteors, yeah, no major meteor showers, no minor meteor showers, a couple of little meteor dribbles. If you're out having a look at the clear night and you happen to see a meteor, you might trace it back to Hydra or Crucius and see if one of those field meteors is actually one from a minor meteor shower. But I'm not going to suggest that anybody schedule a night of observing out in the freezing cold to look for a good meteor shower, because there's just nothing there. So we'll skip over that. What we do have, though, are some decent comets. 19P Borrelly is ninth magnitude in Pisces. That should be easy to target for just about any telescope, and maybe binoculars if you're in good sky. 104P Coel in Cetus. C 2019 L3 Atlas. It's a 9.7 in Gemini, and it's kind of fading away now, but this has been a good comet for many months now. I think we've just about had all the fun we're going to get out of it, but it's still there if you haven't seen it yet and want to go looking for it. 67P, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that and embarrass myself or its discoverers. 9.8 magnitude in Cancer. That's actually going to be a good candidate too, because it's going to be right overhead during prime observing time for us over the next month. Now, since this is on the internet, and I'm thinking there's a non-zero chance that being watched by someone in the southern hemisphere, 2021 A1 Leonard and 22P Kopf are both still visible, still bright, but only visible from the southern hemisphere. So if you're down there and you've got a clear sky, I can't tell you exactly where they are. You'll have to do your own lookup on the internet for that for any given night. But those are two brightish comets that are probably still worth looking up. So I always like to throw in a double star. Double stars are fun. They're always there. And they make good observing projects, good way to test your equipment and your own observing skills. Procyon is the one I've picked this time. Earlier on, I did Sirius, and this is the same sort of deal. It's a bright star with a white dwarf companion. This one, however, is even more challenging than Sirius. For one thing, the white dwarf companion, is closer, it's fainter, you've got a wider gap in the brightness between the primary and the secondary, and the geometry is not quite as useful. And Sirius is more like this, Procyon's more like this, so you get less of a gap going from the primary to the standby if you're looking at it from a point of view of the movement in the sky. And the reason I point that out is one of the ways to find these white dwarfs is to set up your telescope so that you're looking at a post or a wall or something where you're expecting the star to appear. And if you wait patiently, the white dwarf companion should appear first. So for that reason, you want a nice wide separation between the two stars side to side. Don't get a lot of that in Procyon, so it's a bit more challenging. You can do it with an occulting eyepiece, which is an eyepiece that has a black bar through it. You put the black bar over the primary, and you can orient it as necessary, and then have a much better chance of seeing the secondary star. You could try it with a camera, and the astrophotographers here will know the tricks better than I do. Things like rotating your telescope tube so that the spider arms holding up your secondary cause the diffraction spikes to point away from the white dwarf. Now, I always love to have a variable star. Variable stars are my thing. That's what drags me out on the worst nights to observe. And this time I've picked T Tauri. Um, it's a very interesting star. It's a very young star, not quite on the main sequence, and has a lot of rapid changes, usually in the zero 0.1 magnitude range. Now, experience doing deep sky during variable star observing has led me to believe, and this is backed up by a lot of research, that the human eye can accurately measure 1/10 of a magnitude change, or 1/10 of a magnitude difference between one star and another. So this is a really good target for someone who wants to, test their visual acuity and really test your skills. And this one's even cooler because it has a nearby reflection nebula, Hind's variable nebula. And the reason it's a variable nebula is because it's reflecting light from a variable star. So you can not only observe how the star is changing brightness, but you can observe how the nebula is apparently changing shape as it gets lit up in different ways by its star. Now, if you're the kind of person who has an infrared telescope, you can also look for its companion. It is a double star. I'm going to assume that very few people here have infrared telescopes or a platform on the Atacama Desert to look. But it's a thing you can look up online, see what the professional researchers are doing. It's just one more thing that makes it an interesting star. And this is another suggestion I got from Frank Dempsey, R. Leporis. I figure that since the meteors and planets have let us down so badly, we're going to do 2 variable stars this month. We're going to indulge my whims. R. Leporis, very red star in the constellation Lepus, just below Orion. A good wide range there, 5.5 to 11.7 magnitude. It should be visible to the naked eye from a reasonably dark sky. And what we have here is an old red giant star with carbon buildups in its atmosphere that come and go. And this is one of the brightest of the carbon stars. If you dig out your observer's handbook, you can actually find a whole page on carbon stars, which are really bright red. It's one of those things, if you're going to show your friends that there are colors in the stars, this is an outstanding red example. And just because it's a weird world of coincidences, this is also known as Hind's Crimson Star. That's the same Hind who named the variable nebula around T Tauri. So, this is the Hind celebration month. So what we have coming up in the world of spaceflight, the James Webb Space Telescope is at its location. It's going to be being tested and brought to life over the next few months. We have to keep a sharp eye on that. I'm expecting fascinating and amazing things. To be honest, I was pretty nervous that it wouldn't get there. It would crash on takeoff or fail to unfold, but everything is going very nicely so far, knock on wood, and we should be good. The Indian Space Agency is doing their SSLV demonstration launch, scheduled for sometime within the next month, no date specified. I'm skipping over all the Falcon launches. They're not really news anymore. They're just so common that there's nothing special about them anymore. If they'd done something like launch 2 of them and land them beside each other, that's the kind of thing I would tune in for. But just seeing another satellite go up, we've seen it all before. The ISS will be passing overhead in the evening until February 7th, in the morning from the 16th until the next meeting. I'm sure all the long-term astronomers have seen the ISS pass over many times. I myself never get sick and tired of it. And if there's anybody just getting into the hobby, check out heavensabove.com for times and locations and go and check it out. It is absolutely fascinating to see a spaceship with people in it flying overhead. It's like science fiction come to life. But what if it's cloudy? What if indeed? Well, we've got all kinds of astronomy-based projects at zooniverse.org. There are lots of other science projects there too, but we're going to stick with astronomy. 4 projects which I thought looked interesting this month: the Solar Jet Hunter, Meerkat looking for bursts from space, excuse me, the Black Hole Hunter, and G-Witch Hunter for hunting gravitational waves. These are all projects where you and I and anybody can get involved and get some hands-on science under our fingers. And the other thing I'm going to suggest is remote telescopes. Just because the sky is terrible here and it's going to snow for the rest of our lives, there are plenty of places where, thanks to the modern universe we live in, to the internet, we can track down robotic telescopes that are available for people like you and I to use. The RISC robotic telescope is obviously going to be the first one on the list, since it belongs to all of us here in the RISC. But there are others available. Look up telescope.org, SLU.com. NASA has its own micro observatory that's open to the public. And Skynet University was one that I found online that looked promising as well. Now, the non-RASC ones, I cannot vouch for whether they're good, whether they're cheap, whether you'll be able to get to use them because they're too crowded. But thanks to the miraculous power of search engines, Googling for robotic telescopes or remote telescopes will turn up all kinds of options for you, and hopefully get you a bit of night sky until we get some proper night sky here of our own. And that is what I have for tonight and for this month, and I hope that's got something useful for you. And are there any questions?
Yeah.
Andy, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, Andy. Well done as always. Let's go to Emma with some presentations. Some questions for Andy.
Hi, yeah, so we got a couple of comments from Chris Vaughn. So starting off, Mars will skim through the north edge of Messier 22 in the Great Sagittarius cluster on Saturday morning, March 5th.
Okay.
Sunday night, the max eastern lunar libration will favor Mare Smithy and Mare Marginis.
Okay, always worth knowing. I like the libration question because that allows me to tell people to look for Mare Orientalis, which is a sea on the far side of the moon, which appears as the moon librates back and forth. I don't think we have a good apparition of it this month, but for future months, keep an eye out for it and watch for the far side of the moon.
Very cool. And we also got a question from Paul Markov. What is the period of R. Leporis?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for that off the top of my head. If only I had a handbook here that had that kind of information. Yeah, sorry, I don't have that immediately for you. I can get an answer for you in the chat before the evening is out.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's it from me.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks again, Andy. Let's move to our next speaker, Michael Cook, and he'll tell us about the relocation and expansion of his observatory. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Just want to say thanks to Paul for reaching out to me, asking me to present to you. He asked me quite a while ago, but I said, oh no, I'm in the middle of building something, so I had to put it off for over a year. But here we are tonight, so I'm finally glad to be able to be here. First time presenting virtually to you guys, so let's give it a go. I've been a member with the RSC since 1975, mostly as a life member, and I'm basically going to cover the relocation as well as reassembly of my two observatories from Newcastle to an area in North Port Hope rural area. If it sounds confusing, it will all come clear to you in the following slides. So the presentation will also show how I consolidated my dome observatory with the roll-off roof observatories into one structure. So some of you may have been to Newcastle Observatory that are watching tonight, I'm not sure. This is in Newcastle. It's about an hour east of Toronto, just off the 401. And Paul Markov reminded me that I presented in person at the March 2006 Toronto Centre meeting. I totally forgot about that, but I still can't remember. I have those seniors moments now. But anyway, we bought this house in 2004 and immediately placed the dome on it as a third floor space. The observatory was in operation for 15 years. So on this third floor, you have the dome, where I got an unobstructed 360-degree field of view because there were no other buildings taller than 2 stories in the vicinity. And just off the dome, there's a control room, just off the dome floor. And one could, if you're sitting at the control room desk, you could actually see the telescope in action through the window that you see there. The dome housed a Meade 40 centimeter on a Mathis fork mount. And my main observational activity is CCD photometry of variable stars, primarily the cataclysmic and Myra types. And I work mostly in the V band, but I've also dabbled with B, R, and I. All the observations are performed autonomously using Astronomer's Control Panel. And you can see the interface here. It's usually accessible just using your web browser. I can access the dome and all the controls and everything else anywhere on the planet as long as I have an internet connection. I submit my observations to the AAVSO and the Center for Backyard Astrophysics. I also recently joined the Global Supernova Search team, but being with my observatories in a bit of a disarray right now, I have yet to make any contributions to those guys. So my data has been used in numerous times in astronomical journals. I've co-authored about a dozen papers or so and appeared in the likes of Astrophysical Journal and similar periodicals. Here's just an example of an 8-hour of time series photometry for a cataclysmic variable called OV-BOO. It's generally a pulsating white dwarf in a binary system with a period of about 66 minutes. And you can see how the CCD camera can actually pick up the fluctuations in magnitude. These are about 1 to 2 minute exposures. So getting back to the observatory, well, that was just about what I do, about myself and what I do. Let's get back to the observatories now. So in the summer of 2020, I added a roll-off roof observatory in the backyard in Newcastle. Just recall now, this is the summer of 2020. And it was built to accommodate 4 piers with a telescope at each pier. And the objective is to have simultaneous photometric observations of different targets with obviously 4 different telescopes, in addition to the one that's in the dome. And the structure was assembled primarily with screws and bolts. The walls are all modular sections. And the whole idea here was we knew we were going to be moving in about 3 or 5 years. So that's movable. And fortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, that day came as soon as the observatory was completed in September of 2020, just as the crazy housing market was beginning to ramp up. So my wife and I decided that, let's get going here. We decided our next move would be better now, or it's going to be never. So the only thing I wanted to mention in this one here slide here was note the low ceiling of the roll-off roof. And that's because I wanted to keep the structure as low as possible in the backyard. The backyard wasn't exactly a large space, so I wanted to keep the scale sort of in keeping with the backyard. But I'm glad we moved because I was able to remedy that situation, and you'll see that in the following slides. So here we go with the move. In October 2020, we made our move from Newcastle, shown right here by the Newcastle, Ontario here, red flag, out to an area north of Port Hope. It's about a 25-minute drive from our previous residence. It's a much better location. A light pollution map showing Newcastle Village here. Bortle scale, I think, is like 6, something like 5 or 6, and this area in North Port Hope now is about 4, probably a little better than 4. But the other advantage is there's no local light pollution in the form of street lights or neighborhood lights from adjoining houses because all the houses are far apart. So here's the property. It's situated 168 meters high up in the Northumberland Hills. It's about 2.5 acres. The wooded area at the back, third, was chosen as the location of the observatory. The trees block the light from the surrounding properties, not that there is any really. Here's the concept for the observatory consolidation. So at the right is the original dome. In the middle, we connected by a control room, a warm room as well. And to the left is the reassembled roll-off roof observatory. Note that I added a short wall to the roll-off roof observatory to eliminate any roof scope collisions. The bottom of the diagram, you can see the configuration of the 4 piers. It's shown inside the roll-off roof observatory. And the observatory is oriented in an east-west direction. So this is the backwoods where the observatory would go, just beyond the 5 blue spruce trees. I should say that parts of the disassembled dome and observatory and the roll-off roof observatory, all those parts were sat in my garage, one of my garages, for the whole winter, winter of 2020, 2021. Because we had to do some significant renovations to the house. I just didn't have time to put all this together in the late fall of 2020. No time for astronomy. But starting May 1st in 2021, we started some land clearing, hired a company to do that. Took out about 100 trees. They chipped all the trees in sight. The trees wasn't too sad to see them go because they were Scotch pine. They're not even indigenous to Canada. Even the birds don't like them. And really thinned out. The woods weren't managed very well. A few days later, May 3rd, began excavation for the location we're going to put the observatory. That being for the concrete slab that the observatory is going to sit on. So we hired a family-run company that did the excavation and concrete work. They were quite fantastic workers. After the excavation and minor leveling, the 4 pier forms for the roll-off roof observatory and the dome pier were set in place. These are witch's hat PVC concrete forms. As well, a quantity of aggregate was placed and leveled as a substrate for the concrete slab pour. May 4th, the cement truck arrives, and this is the first day it arrived to do just the pour, or the concrete pour for the piers. They had to be shoveled into each pier form by hand. And then while still freshly poured, we had these plywood jigs that hold the bolt pattern for the steel piers. And these bolts were embedded into the concrete to receive the steel piers later on. The same day, the form for the concrete slab was installed. Here's just a close-up of the jig for the bolt pattern for the piers. These are 1-inch bolts, 120 degrees apart. So after allowing the concrete piers to set and cure for a few days, the crew returned to pour the concrete slab. As you can see, the slab is reinforced with steel mesh. It was ended up being a good pour. They floated the concrete. I didn't require an ultra nice finish because it was going to be a floor in here anyway, so they just did like mostly a rough float. And here we have the finished pour. Note the dome pier in the foreground is offset to the south to accommodate the equatorial tilt of the fork-mounted telescope. This offset enables the telescope tube to be centered in the dome when pointed at the zenith. Also, there's a gap in between the piers and the slab, just to make sure that I don't introduce any vibrations from the slab to the piers themselves. Also, while the excavator was around, we had them dig a trench from the observatory location all the way back to the house, and that was to bring power and data cables. The power cable is a direct burial armored tech cable, the black cable on the right in the right picture. And while the data cables are run through conduit, the gray tubing you see there, there are Ethernet and coax cables in that conduit. So here's the finished slab ready to receive the building, and the surrounding property was properly graded for drainage as well. And I was advised to wait a couple weeks to let the concrete cure well enough before construction of the building. So that didn't start until 22 days later, about 3 weeks. So May 29th, construction starts. I should mention that the whole thing was built by me alone, moi, because of this silly thing called COVID going around. So it was quite a challenge. So I started the dome end of the structure, did that first, since it was the simplest to build, just a square building. And that way I could get the dome parts out of the garage, free up space in the garage to do other work in there as well. So after a week, the dome building was completed and the dome installed. And it would take me another 6 weeks for the roll-off roof observatory and control room to be basically completed. I started with reassembling the roll-off roof base walls shown here. Easy enough because, like I mentioned, the wall sections were modular and they just bolted together. I should mention that the entire structure is bolted to the concrete slab as well. With the roll-off roof base framed, work on the roll-off roof itself could begin. And here are the bogies that carry the roll-off roof on its tracks. Each bogie has 3 6-inch V-grooved roller-bearing industrial casters. You can see them here. There's 3 of them in this bogie. Each bogie has a capacity, each caster has a capacity of about 500 kilos. So there was 6 wheels in all. Gives you 3,000 kilos of capacity for weight bearing. I did estimate the roof to have a mass of about 1,000 kilos, so there's lots of tolerance to count for carrying the roof as well as for snow load. And boy, did we ever get a lot of snow lately. Everything about this construction had to be managed as a one-person effort. Winches, leverage, and a strong back were my friends. With the bogies in place, the roll-off roof short wall framing could be built. Recall this was a new feature of the roof, so that way the roof trusses would clear the scopes at all times, regardless of telescope orientation. Here the roll-off roof trusses and the rest of the framing is complete on Canada Day, but not totally complete. There was on the underside of the roof, I had to do some added stiffening here. You can see a little bit over here. Let me just, if I get this here, pen, that one there, there we go. Right here, I made these plywood gussets to stiffen the structure between the short wall and the trusses. To complete the enclosure, I reinstalled the steel roofing that I had purchased. This is a and that shingles was initially chosen a couple of years ago, so I could disassemble the entire structure as was originally planned. So the steel shingles are held on with, they're all interlocking. It's a great product, very easy to put on and take off. Make quite quick work about it. And there we have the entire structure enclosed and weather tight. The next day, work what I call the roll-off roof trestles. The first thing was to reinstall the roll-off roof rail beams. There's a couple sitting off the back of the Jeep right there. These had to be, there's two that run from the roll-off roof building up to the west of the plane. Each step has to be level, and perfectly parallel so that the roof can be easily opened and closed with not too much effort and without any binding. So here's the finished trestle with lots of cross bracing to ensure support and rigidity for the 1,000-kilo roof. And there we have the roof open. I'd like to point out that the meteor cam there's a meteor cam on the mast right there. And there are actually now 3 cams pointing at different sky locations, and these cams are part of the global meteor network. Here's a more recent shot showing a new mast for the meteor cams. I should mention that these cams are controlled using Raspberry Pi computers, pretty nifty stuff. Here's just one snapshot of a night's work of meteor cams. That was taken on January 26th. And you get quite a few dozens of meteors every night. It's pretty amazing stuff. Back to the construction, both the control room floor and the roll-off roof observatory floor have moisture membranes and are heavily insulated. So you get nice, warm, toasty feet when you're out there. Each steel pier in the roll-off roof observatory is bolted to the concrete in-ground piers via a flange and 3 1-inch bolts. The control room, shown in the distance, is provided with a window to monitor scope activities. And with the floors insulated, I was able to add some outdoor carpet as well. This view is from the control room. 2 telescopes have been installed to date. There's a Takahashi 150 shown in the background, very nice instrument. And in the foreground, there's an 8-inch Celestron Edge that I'm currently hosting for someone else. I also installed smart controlled LED lighting so that you can select from a full spectrum of lighting from white to any color you basically want. That's a great little addition. You can actually say, hey, Google, turn on the red lights, and away she goes. The dome scope has yet to be installed, but that should be happening this month. Here's the entrance to and from the dome to the control room, and there are 3 steps up to the dome floor from the control room. This is the new pier for the 40-centimeter Meade on its fork mount. Since the dome building is 8 feet tall, the pier it's a brand new pier, had to be taller for the scope to clear the dome slit. This new pier is pushing 200 kilos, and it's going to take some effort to get into place. Let's see what else here. The roof right now, I was opening it manually, but I recently installed a motor to open and close the roof. It's basically from a gadget or a mechanism used to open sliding gates. It's a rack and pinion drive. The rack is along the observatory wall there, and the motor containing the pinion is at the far end. And basically, when you hit a button for a remote control, it can open the roof in quite quick fashion. I think it's 8 inches per second. It takes like 30 seconds to open the roof. And this whole thing will be automated with third-party equipment in a few months. This is just a video. I hope it's coming through for you guys. It looks like it is. Shows the first test of the roof motor in action, and yeah, it works pretty well. So I'm quite happy with that. So there you have it. I just wanted to mention that a heat pump was installed as well to the observatory. This gives me air conditioning in the summer and heating in the wintertime. It's a great, although expensive, it's a very efficient way to heat and cool a space. I don't even notice this thing on my electrical bill. It's quite something. and it even provides heat during those minus 25-degree nights that we had not too long ago. Yeah, so I'm about to wrap up here. So if I was presenting in person, I would have brought a stack of these moon phase calendars for you, to each and every one of you. But if you head over to my website, you can download it there under the download section, and right there. But you can also reach me at this website, newcastleobservatory.ca. And I just thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing this with all of us. That's an impressive facilities you've built. And what's even more impressive are your carpenter skills. Well done. Let's go to Emma. Do we have any questions for Michael?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. First one coming in from Ralph. Did you have any problems with zoning or permits to put up the new observatory complex?
No, because the property being a sufficiently large property, I mentioned like 2.5 acres, lots of room for outbuildings. Everybody in this rural subdivision here has outbuildings even larger than mine. So the only thing I needed to get was a building permit.
Very nice. And Paul Markov wants to know, where did you source the piers from?
Oh, I had the piers on my own design, and I just drew up some plans for them. They're pretty basic. I mean, it's just a steel tube with a flange welded to the bottom and a top piece welded to the top, and then you just have to specify the bolt hole pattern and any bolt holes or center taps for anything you want to attach to the top of it. And I just brought this to a metal fabrication company in Bowmanville, and they turn that around. They turn on these piers like in a couple weeks.
Very cool. Thank you. That's all the questions.
Fabulous. Thanks again, Michael. We'll have you back in the future, perhaps, and you can tell us a bit about the observations you make with all the equipment there. Let's move on to our next speaker, and that's Krishna Vedela, and he'll talk to us about the Observing Logbook. Go ahead, Krishna.
Hello, everyone. I'm Krishna Vedela from Toronto. I want to talk to you about an astronomy logbook that I thought was quite helpful for me to record my observations whenever I do stargazing. We all know we all started observing skies at some point in our life. Usually, it started with watching the night sky, just sitting there with our family, friends, and slowly we start upgrading ourselves, graduating towards graduating to telescopes, like you see on the screen here. Sometimes you might be driving on the side of the road, and you would see something quite interesting up in the sky. Um, for example, to the left-hand side, bottom left of the screen, you see what I thought I was picturing an aurora from right here in Toronto. In fact, outskirts of Toronto. Whether it is true or not, I wouldn't be able to know until I go back and check the records if that is indeed the fact. Um, Not only that, sometimes you might be observing the sky, or maybe in fact taking a picture of a celestial object. To the right hand side here is a blue snowball nebula. It is an NGC object, quite faint, easy to detect from an 8-inch telescope, or at least that's what I heard. And so I spent about 4 hours trying to find that object. And unless I know when I did that, what time I recorded, what was the sky conditions, what were the sky conditions at the time, I wouldn't be able to go back and recreate the same situation and save spending 4 hours looking for it again. And that leads us to recording these observations. These are some examples of how others have recorded what they observed going back to 1800s. And in fact, these observations, these recordings, or these notes that they made at the time have proven quite useful, not only to them, but for later researchers researchers who look back and see what was the magnitude of the star at the time, what was the shape of that object at the time, did it change from then to now, and so on and so forth. Now, their handwriting can be quite legible, like the one here on the left hand side, or it can be completely illegible. However, it is an observation nonetheless. And RASC has provided good PDF files to record such observations, to make such recordings in a very concise and in an organized fashion. So the left-hand side is a snippet from RASC Messier Object Certificate Program, where we can record what the object is, at what time did we record, some of these details, and it also allows you to make some additional notes that you can add per the observations at that time. And it is very important for us to do so because it promotes citizen science. Like I said, it allows us to come up with new discoveries. What we saw before, there might be a star that you have not seen, but today it doesn't appear anymore, um, which could mean that probably it's a supernova explosion or something like that. So it is very important for us to do the record keeping of these observations, whether we do it casually or whether we do it for scientific purposes. When we try to do these recordings in a dark sky situation, there are plenty of problems that we face. First and foremost, it is very difficult to write on a piece of paper or in a notebook when we do not have a table with us. And carrying a table along with your telescope, along with your observation equipment and all of that, it could be quite a daunting task. um, the papers, if we write them on our, if we write them, if we make our notes on a piece of paper, it it doesn't stay for too long. It can get destroyed if water spills on it, or if you put a coffee on it. uh, and we cannot even search through those notes to in order to go through and refer to a note that I made back in 2018. I would have to go through a notebook dated 2018, rumble through the pages, and then find out which one that is. Um, but today we are living in a 21st century. Can we come up with a solution for all these problems? And that's exactly what I thought to myself when COVID hit, and we were in the lockdown, couldn't go out anymore. So okay, let's look at these problems and the solutions that we can address one by one. Legible handwriting, we can replace it with keyboard typing. If we are in a dark area and we don't have a piece of paper, can we use our smartphones or a tablet screen to do that? Yes. Similarly, we can, if we are able to store these information in electronic format like an Excel spreadsheet or some kind of a database, then we can go and search through them with a single query, or in a more electronics in a much more rapid fashion. And that gave me the requirements of what I needed to do, because this was the problem that I was facing myself. Every night I would go and observe, trying to get in order to work for my Messier certificate. I would I would take a couple of pieces of paper or note. In fact, I have a notebook with a red light. Try to write down my notes in there. Come back home, fade it into that PDF file. All of this was quite inundating, and I thought, we could do it much better. So I needed to come up with some solution that would work on tablets, phones. In fact, even web. I do not need a particular type of device. If I can store all my data in a web-based platform, then I can access it from anywhere. I do not have to restrict myself to observing within in the vicinity of my home, with where Wi-Fi is available, or go far when I travel outside of Canada. In fact, I can still access it and update information in there, because it has to work in a dark environment. I need to make it in a night mode. That is, all the text would be in red and the background is black, so it doesn't affect my night vision. The data, whenever I store it in the cloud, I want to keep it secure, and nobody should get access to it. Today, I'm storing just my observing information, but tomorrow I might store something else. So I need to make it future proof. I need to have an ability to go through and search through the observations, filter out, and select which ones I want to look at again. For example, give me all the instances of observing the Crab Nebula. Like one of the previous speakers mentioned, it would keep changing its shape over a period of time. So if I observe it today, I want to make sure if I observe it again 10 years later, has there been any difference? Did it change in its brightness? Or is it still the same? Or in fact, has it gone bigger in the conditions of my field of vision? Then in order to get my certification, I want to at the end be able to convert all that information, all those observing sessions, into a convenient PDF file that I can give it to RASC, and hopefully they would accept it and say yes, you get the certificate. So I should get that. Um, Similarly, I want to be able to know if I go out tonight, what are the Messier objects? What are the objects that I would be able to see immediately? I do not want to go to another app and figure out, okay, in this location, in this given period of time, which of these Messier objects are visible. So as a convenience, I wanted to have that ability to show up as well. That led me to build this app called as that I call Astronomy Logbook. It starts with a simple sign-in page, and it gives you the ability to sign in using Google, Apple, and Facebook. So I don't want myself or anybody else using it to worry about passwords, to worry about a new login information, and whatever existing login authentication mechanisms you have, you can continue to use it. Just one less thing to remember, one more simple step. And this is the once a person logs in, you're presented with your list of observations that you have done so far. So as you can see, it's a scrolling list of every observation, and each observation is presented to you as a tile. On the top is your title. If you have a Messier number that mentioned in it, you can have that. That is presented over there, and they're all organized in the descending order of observation date. So the newest observation is on the top. The oldest observation would be at the bottom. And this list is loaded continuously every time you make a change. Now, let's say I'm in a location where there's no internet, there's no cellular connectivity, there's no Wi-Fi. In those situations, the data gets stored locally on the phone. That gets presented. And if you make any changes, those changes also get stored locally. And once you have connection to the internet again, that would be updated automatically in the background. All that happens seamlessly without the end user getting affected or even being aware of it. On the top is a list of all these filters that I have, a search window where you can search for Messier objects, you can search for NGC numbers that you have observed, or you can actually search for the observations in a certain date range between from the 1st of January to the end of January. How many observations have I done so far? Things like that. And once I have a shortlisted items, once I have shortlisted the items, I can long press any of these tiles to select them. And when I click the PDF button on the top right, it would simply create a PDF page for me, like so. And this PDF file would have the name of the user on the top left corner. And as a future add-on, I was thinking of adding a digital signature that would ensure and authenticate the PDF that was created. And this PDF you can then simply share with any user, or in fact even RASC. How can I record the observation? If you look at the on this observation page, on the bottom right corner is a plus button. When you click that plus button, you are led to record a new observation. And in this page, you're presented to enter title, the Messier number, the NGC catalog number, if any, if you have to. but the title is important. The latitude and longitude values are acquired automatically if you authenticate the application to use your GPS location. Similarly, the address location is also auto-filled from on the Apple or Android devices. This this tool is also available using a web interface, but on the web interface, some of this information you need to have to fill in manually. And so while recording the observation, you can also mention which equipment was used, what were the seeing conditions, and you can add as many note points as you can to the list. It can be 1, 10. You can edit, delete them today, tomorrow, anytime you want. This is an example of one such observation that I made, where I have about 6 notes that I have done here. Swiping any of these notes can remove that particular note. You can add more notes later on once you go back home and you think, "Oh, this is what I remember seeing." You can add that on later. Um, List of equipment. So once you have, as I said, today you might have an equipment consisting of an 8-inch telescope. Tomorrow you might upgrade it to a different 8-inch telescope, or even a 10-inch. Or it might be that you went to DDO and observed using the big scope. In that case, you can absolutely add this information in here, and so that you can continue making your observations and keep storing them for posterity. One important thing that my wife and I thought of when we always go stargazing is the checklist of equipment that we want to take. And it has been numerous times that I forget one or the other. So I added a simple checklist of a checklist option where you can add your own items in there. And every time you go, while packing up your equipment, you can check each box. And once you're coming back, you can uncheck each of them in order to make sure whatever you took came back with you and you did not forget accidentally anything at the observing site. And this is the Messier list that I added recently, and that was quite challenging, also fun to do. Um, so this list is a list of all the 110 Messier objects, number one. Two, um, the entire Messier catalog was uploaded using an Excel file to a central database, and that includes the right accession and declination information for each of them, and some information like what kind of a target it is. Is it a supernova remnant? Is it a globular cluster? Is it an open cluster? How easy or difficult is that target for us to observe? So with RA and declination and knowing the current location where the user is, the cell phone, in fact, um, I went through and searched, come up with went through the list of all the equations and came up with a simple structure that can compute the rising time and setting time for each of these objects on the fly and present to you in this over here. Because as you know, based on your location, based on the time of the year, the rise and set times for these objects would change. And depending on that, you can figure out which of these objects would be visible in the night sky tonight, and which of those would not be. So on the right hand side, the extreme right hand side, the X mark or the check mark indicates whether the time window, the rise time and set time, falls within the night period. And if it does, it gives you a checklist, check mark. That means you can go and observe it tonight. Otherwise, you see an X mark. That means you cannot see it. It would not be so easy for you to watch in the night sky tonight. And on the extreme left hand side, it also shows you which of these objects have I actually observed before. So, for example, M1, the Messier 1, I had observed it before, and that's why it shows me that I symbol. Whereas M9 is something that I haven't seen so far, so it shows me that I symbol with an oblique sign in front of it. So in a very convenient fashion, I can go through the objects that I have not seen yet and which are visible tonight, and check them off my bucket list. So I would be one step closer to achieving my certificate. It was easy for me to build it over a couple of months, and I initially built it for myself. And I thought if people might find it useful, so I let it um, uh, distribute. I distribute it for free, and you can download it on Apple Store and on Google Play. You can also try it on the website up there, astrolog.vedela.holdings. All the communication happens through encrypted channels, the HTTPS protocol, and the login information stays secure with the user themselves. And also, what I intended to do, and I have done, is that I have released all the source code for this project for free on a repository system called as GitHub. So if you're interested, feel free to let me know, and I would be glad to share that information with you. Or if you actually search for Astrolog on GitHub, you should be able to find it. The code is pretty straightforward. It has been documented um, uh, for for everybody to use it. And if you are a programmer, you can absolutely create your own repository and develop your own app and install it for your own use without having to rely on the backend infrastructure that I had set up. I initially conceptualized the project in February 21, and over a period of time, slowly developed it, improved it, and had a lot of fun using it myself. Um, for whoever is technical in nature, this is the technology stack that I use. The backend uses Google Firebase. It is free for the application that I have, at least for myself. And even if many people start using it, it would still be free, unless it gets quite big, and then charges would kick in. Um, but in order, there are ways to get around that as well, and it's quite easy to do so. So I'm not too worried about it. Future plans. So today I have the Messier catalog listed in. I want to add the NGC and the Caldwell as well. The user interface, it works for me, but I'm pretty sure for various other people, we can adapt it and improvise on adding more features and more information to it in a concisely, in a non-cluttered way. Computing the rise and set times was fun, like I said, and the equations. The funny thing with this was the equations were not clearly mentioned anywhere, and there's no one location where I could go and say, hey, if I have RA, if I have declination information, latitude, longitude, and the date time in UTC format, these are the steps to do so. So that's why I documented all of that, and I would be uploading that information to the GitHub repository for people to be able to access it as well. So having said that, this has been very fun for me to do and to record my observations. I hope you guys find it useful as well.
Thank you very much, Krishna, for sharing this with us, and for the hard work, and for, of course, sharing the source code for anybody who wants to continue the development. That's fantastic. So we can see how capable our members are. It's quite something tonight. Lots of good stuff being shown. All right. Do we have any questions for Krishna, Emma?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. The first one comes in from Ralph Chu. He says, it looks like a great way to record observations for the Observer's PINs programs.
Thank you. That was my intention. I wanted to do it for myself, and it just grew and thought it would be there's more scope to this than what I initially intended.
Cool. Andy says Andy wants to know, for a future version, could we please get a place to enter variable star observations?
Absolutely. So in the future, that's the next thing I wanted to There are a couple of projects that I wanted to evolve this into. One was to be able to send the CCD camera information directly to this app, and it would figure some of these things out direct on its own, or enter the values manually. That is one of the things that I wanted to add. The other thing that I think would be interesting is to add the ability for people to add sketches right there um, on the tablet or the phone. So these are the two items that are on my list. I just need to prioritize which one to go first.
Cool. Thank you. And Ron wants to know, might you use your system for a Messier marathon next month?
Absolutely.
Yes, that's all the questions we have for tonight. Thank you.
Very good.
You
So, Krishna, software is never complete, right? It's never finished. It just keeps evolving, more features and so on. So, I'll reach out back to you in a little while, maybe a year or two, and you can give us an update.
absolutely.
All right. Very good. So that concludes our speakers for this evening. I'll turn it over to Tom Luton to take care of the announcements for this evening.
All right, and thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much to our speakers. It's been a wonderful evening. So, and good evening to everyone out there. And let's get into the announcements on this cold winter night. So, as Paul was mentioning earlier, this is one of two types of meetings that we have here online on YouTube. This was our recreational astronomy night, and in 2 weeks, we're going to have one of our speakers' nights. If you're watching us live, please use the YouTube chat feature. Say hello. Enter some questions for the presenters, as other people have done this evening. If you're a new member, please introduce yourself. And if you're coming from far, far away, let us know where you're from. I'm not that far away, actually. I'm coming to you from my couch here in Toronto. So our next speakers night is, like I said, in 2 weeks on February the 16th at 7:30 p.m. Vivian Yun Yan Tan from York University will be discussing a brief history of galaxy quenching over cosmic time. Here on youtube.com/rasktoronto/live. Our next recreational astronomy night meeting is on the 2nd of March at 7:30 p.m. Dennis Ray will be discussing the sky this month. John Reed and Chris Vaughn will be introducing 110 Things to See with a Telescope, a new book for finding and viewing the Messier objects. And Dennis Zatsev will be talking about the TMT, the 30-meter telescope, the new generation of the ground-based observatories. And as Paul said earlier, if you'd like to present something, please drop him a note. Coming up the DDO over the next few weeks, on the 11th of February, Dr. Saeed Rastgu will be talking about black holes, what we see on the outside and what happens inside. There's a $12.50 registration fee. Links to the registration page can be found at raskto.ca. Sunday stargazing on Sunday, February 13th, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. There's a cost of $6.78. And again, registration is online. And then DDO Up on the Sky, Saturday, February 19th, 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m., $12.50 fee. Registration links can be found at raskto.ca. So we've spoken a little bit about observing certificates tonight. We've got a large number of them. We've got the Explore the Universe certificate. We've got the Explore the Moon through binoculars or telescope. We've got the Messier catalog. We have the finest new general catalog objects. We have double stars. We have the Isabel Williamson Lunar Certificate, Deep Sky Gems, and Deep Sky Challenge. If you'd like more information, or if you are basically done your observing certificate and would like to fill out the paperwork, so you'll get one of these nice pins that are here on the are shown on the screen, please visit www.rask.ca/certificate-programs. So our observing sessions are still suspended until further notice due to COVID. Our sessions at Baby Village Park, Long Sault Conservation Area, and the Ontario Science Centre. The CAO is open, but the road is closed, so you're going to have to make your way in for the last kilometer or so along the roadway. Access is the CAO facilities by members and families only in a non-communal fashion. With total site occupancy, it's limited to 10 bookings up to 25 individuals, with one member or family upstairs in the house. Full details are on the website. Read everything before you make your booking. This is the part where I get to plug RASC membership and reminder to make your renewals. You can buy and renew a membership at secure.rasc.ca. If COVID has thrown things for a loop, the RASC does have an emergency fund. It's completely confidential. At Mempub, contact the membership secretary at mempub@rasc.ca. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a very good night. Thank you very much for joining us. Please follow us on all of the various forms of social media we've got listed here. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay safe, keep looking up, and have a good night. Take care.